Let's get another investor perspective, this time from Shubhang Shankar, Managing Director of Syngenta Ventures.
My name is Shubhang Shankar, and I am a managing director with Syngenta Ventures based out of Basel in Switzerland. Let me give you a brief background about Syngenta Ventures and the portfolio that we have. So, Syngenta Ventures, as many of you may already know, it is the corporate venture capital unit of the Syngenta Group, which comprises of Syngenta Crop Protection, Syngenta Seeds, Adama, and Syngenta Group China. And we are in the business of agricultural inputs. We are a relatively small team in the Syngenta system, and our mandate is not very different from a traditional CVC unit. We deploy, capital on behalf of our parent into companies that are at the leading edge, let's say, of innovation in the food and agri space. So we invest in technology innovation, we invest in business model innovation, we invest in areas that are very closely linked with our core R&D functions. We invest in for much more downstream areas, such as e-commerce, fintech, and we even invest, in areas where we do not have a business right now. The idea is to serve a combination of strategic and financial goals on behalf of our parent. But the innovation that we're talking about must have some linkage with the food and agriculture ecosystem. That's the boundary that we have, and within that we can invest in technologies that support our business, that disrupt our business, or basically just create value for farmers going forward. When it comes to some notable trends in the agri-food tech innovation sector, let me break it down a little bit in the short term and in the long term. I think in the short term, it's a very interesting juncture for the overall space, because I think we're coming to the end nearly of the first decade of venture capital investments in agri-food tech. So far, we've not had a full life cycle of companies and funds in this space. But over, I would say, the last year and perhaps the coming year, I think a lot of companies that were established in the past decade will either exit or will be liquidated. Some will fail, as is quite usual for innovation in our space. So I think what we will see is a series of business models that were set up with a certain hypothesis in 2013, 14, 15 will have their moment of truth. Some will survive, some will not. What we're seeing is that a lot of companies and startups which try to sell technology directly to farmers have found that very difficult. So they've pivoted towards more of a B2B to C model rather than a B2C model. Startups that were selling only imagery to farmers have found it very difficult. Startups that were providing farm management software have not really found revenue traction very easy. So I think in the short term, revenue traction was a big challenge. I think there are quite a few long term mega trends that create opportunities for innovation, and it would take a long time to address all of them. But some of the things that I'm really excited about, I would say, are business model innovation in agriculture. So e-commerce and fintech, these are areas that are very well developed in other sectors, but we are just seeing the application of these technologies and business models in agriculture. So I'm very excited about the potential for alternative lending, digital lending, credit insurance in agriculture using digital tools. I'm also quite excited about the whole space of e-commerce, creating new channels to reach farmers. And similarly, I think there is a huge mega trend around the shortage of labor in agriculture that will only get worse over the next 10 years. And I think that creates an opportunity for robotics and automation. So I think opportunities remain. I think we will see a shift in the kind of startups that we see between 2010s and 2020s. But I think, opportunities for innovation will not dry up. When it comes to the impact of COVID-19, I would just like to say that it's, early days yet. We are still not out of the COVID situation, and it feels a bit surprising to be saying this in November, because when the first set of lockdowns happened in March, I did not think that, in November we would be having this conversation. I expected things to perhaps go back to some kind of normal by summer, but that has clearly not happened. And I think this gives us an idea of just how unprecedented and unpredictable the whole situation is. I would say in the agri food tech space, at least in the first half of 2020, and this is borne out, I think, by data as well, we did not see a big slowdown. And I think this is fundamentally because COVID did not lead to a liquidity or a supply side crisis. So, lenders and investors, they did not suddenly, withdraw their wallets from the market. They were still looking for opportunities to fund. So I think the supply side has not been a problem. My biggest worry is that I think the demand side, or the demand for the services or products that startups are going to are looking to provide, that may get impacted in, at least in the short to medium term. So business more plans may have to be revised. And my biggest worry about COVID is the impact it would have on demand. So, if there are no customers, or customers, and this is really dependent on your business model, but if customers are spooked, or customers are not willing to spend over the next year, 2 years, how does this really impact a startup's finances? I think that could be much more disruptive than, the lack of funding. The Israeli innovation landscape, I think, is, an exceptionally fertile and fecund landscape when it comes to innovation. I think, for me and my colleague, we look at innovation ex-US. We have a different team which looks at innovation in US and Latin America, and what we say is that Israel is like our Silicon Valley. So a lot of innovation happens in Israel. A lot of technology innovation happens in the country, and I think that's to do with the fact that you have a very highly skilled and highly educated population. There has been a historic emphasis on R&D. There is a very strong pool of entrepreneurs. There is openness to entrepreneurship, risk taking, limited downsides to failure, all of which I think create a very good ecosystem for entrepreneurship. And I think, just the fact that there are technologies or technology innovation that happens in multiple sectors, which allows, technologies developed for one area to come into another. I think that just creates so much fertile ground for innovation. And that's why I think the Israeli innovation landscape is currently interesting to us and will always remain interesting to us. So we look forward to, exploring it in depth over many, many years.